Takadosh Boker or Bekiim Bahalacha 3 day 50, page 96, Halacha Kafchet 28. The custom of Sephardic Jews is to wear talit katan underneath one's shirt and to likewise tuck in the tzitziot strands inside one's clothing. Although the Torah states you should see them, right? This is not obligating one to actually see wear the talit katan over one's shirt where it's visible. It is sufficient to look at the tzitziot when you're going to place on the talit katan. This is an ancient hallowed custom, and it is incorrect. It is the correct practice according to the teachings of the Kabbalists. It is preferable for yeshiva students to observe this practice and not change their family's traditions. Although the tzitziot tassels will then be resting against the bare skin of their legs, the halakha does not prohibit this, and there is no need to be stringent about it. Nevertheless, it is commendable to arrange the tzitziot, right, to be resting on another one of the garments and not on the bare skin. Okay? Fine. I don't know how he did that he split it up. Right? Okay, fine. Doesn't matter. Okay, we'll do the 29 tomorrow. Fine, let's start. So, the number 28. Okay, Maran and Rishon still discusses this issue at length in Yechavedat, and this is a synopsis. Talit katan, under one shirt or over it. Right? So, this is the today, where do you put the talit katan? On top of the clothing? But Shita Maran is actually on top, right? Or underneath. The Sevra Yitur states that some authorities taught that if someone wishes to fulfill, that means you would actually put the talit on top, the tzitzit part, on top of the clothing. Yeah, like the Hasidim, mamash like that. That's the way of Shita Maran. Yeah, on top of this, exactly. Yeah, yeah, and then you have the tzitziot, which is another like 1 second. So he says, Sevra Yitur states that some authorities thought that if someone wishes to fulfill the mitzvah tzitzit in the same manner, he must wear the talit katan over his garments. The author of Yitur, however, disagreed with this. He explained that although the Torah says uritemoto, Chachamim say that you already expressed right to derive several other halachot. The verse saying you will see it, likewise, does not mean that you have to actually see the tzitzit at all times. It means only that when you first put on the tzitzit and perform that tifa, that's when you will see it. Okay, page 97. Rabbi Yonah and the Mordechai, Sani Rabbeinu Me'in Merotomud, is Maram Merotomud. Okay, they both instructed us to wear, right? He says over here, talitot, right, under the garments. Maran Bet Yosef wrote that this appears to be the opinion of Rabbi Yonah and the Barturim, but he personally disagreed. He argued that the Torah states the purpose of wearing tzitzit is to remember the mitzvot. Since it's necessary to remember the mitzvot, right, it's better to put the talit over one's garments. Okay, Maran cited the proof from the Mukei Yosef in the name of the Ritva. Based on this, Maran Shulchan Aruch wrote the proper way to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzit is to wear the talit katan over one's clothing, so that one will see it at all times or remember the mitzvot. He repeated this in Siman 24:1, saying that it recommended that everyone make sure to wear the talit katan all day long, so that you remember the mitzvot all the time. It's best to wear it over one's clothing. At the very least, one must wear the tzitzit while praying. So it comes out the Shitat Maran, the Shulchan Aruch, mamash, like the way the Hasidim have it, on top, mamash, on top of their clothing. Okay, we're going to see. There's Kabbalah, there's this, there's that. Fine. Rabbeinu Asher cited Rabbeinu Yonah, ruling that although the Talmud permits one to visit a cemetery while wearing tzitzit, that was surely in the era of the Talmud when all the garments had tzitzit attached. It would have been impossible to take off all of your clothing to visit a cemetery. In our times, however, we wear one special garment specifically for the purpose of fulfilling mitzvah tzitzit. Therefore, this garment has a status equal to tefillin, and it is forbidden to wear while visiting a cemetery, in consideration of the honor of those buried there. This was the ruling of the Rabbi Yaakov, the Turim, and the Shulchan Aruch, which means like this. In the olden days, they didn't have a special beged as a tzitzit. All their clothing was split in four and had tzitziot. So if I'm going to tell you now, you have to take off your tzitzit when you go into the cemetery, because if not, you're laughing at the deceased that they can't fulfill the mitzvah, it's a problem. Why, you're going to take off all your clothing? Nowadays, you have a special clothing designed for tzitzit. In the olden days, your shirt was a tzitzit. You're understanding, everything was a tzitzit. Jacket, everything was a tzitzit. In the Bet Yosef, Manan debated whether when or not may not visit a cemetery will wear talit katan under the clothing. It might be a reason that it is dishonorable for those buried there. That only if one displays that it is on top of the clothing. If one wears it under the clothing, maybe it's not disrespectful. Manan concluded discussion by ruling leniently, and this likewise the ruling of the Marshal, right, and the Prisha, the Bach, the Taz, the Shach, all ruling leniently, and the Rav Chida in the Tefillah Shmuel as well. It is obvious from all the poskim that the common custom to wear the talit katan under one's clothing, so that even tzitziot are not visible. The Ma'amar Mordechai pointed out that this passage contradicts his ruling Siman Chet, that one must wear the talit katan over the clothing. To reconcile this, he suggested that although Maran issued the ruling that wear one's over the clothing, he was aware that this is not the accepted custom. Therefore, he justified visiting a cemetery while wearing a talit katan, being that everyone wears it under the clothing. And his ruling to wear it over the clothing is only a recommendation, since he understood that this is the ideal way of fulfilling the mitzvah. The Ma'amar Mordechai added that although the Ritva and Mukesa both stated that one wears talit katan over the clothing, it is clear that they were referring to those communities where men do not wear talit gadol until they're married. And in those places, the unmarried men, they used to wear the talit katan over their clothing, but only while saying Shema and praying. In our communities, where everyone does have a talit gadol, so therefore, obviously, the talit katan is going to be underneath the clothing. But of David bin Zimra, the Baz, he testified that the custom to wear talit katan under the clothing, and this was the practice also of the Gaon Vilna. The Shara Kavanot testified that Oziel wore the talit katan under the clothing, right, over and his undergarment, right, that means over the undershirt, yeah? He says that Oziel taught, moreover, that it is a serious error to wear it on top of the clothing, and he complained that it runs counter to the teachings of the Kabbalah. Rav Chida quotes this Birkei Yosef in Keshe Gudal. Being that the Kabbalists thought that it's absolutely incorrect to wear the talit katan over one's clothing, and Maran wrote only that he recommends wearing it over the clothing, the established custom has become to wear underneath. Meaning you have a recommendation, but you have something called Keneged the Kabbalah. So because of that, you do like the Kabbalah, because anyway, the other one was only a recommendation. As a general rule, we follow the instructions of the Arizal, even when Maran differed in the Shulchan Aruch. All the great rabbis of the previous wore the talit katan underneath the clothing and hidden from you. The Mishnah stated that those people who tuck the tzitziot inside are guilty of ignoring the Torah's instruction, besides the fact that they're guilty of disgracing the mitzvah, and they will be punished for this. Although people defend themselves, explaining that they spend time around non-Jews, they could simply just tuck the tzitziot neatly in the corners of the talit. If a king would grant a special gift and with your name engraved in it, with his name engraved in it, certainly, right, you should for sure show it off. So too our names are the tzitziot, or like the names of Hashem. Despite this argument, the Kabbalists thought that the proper way to hide the talit katan under one's garments, right, and we may certainly rely on their teachings. Shulchan Aruch Gavoa, he says that the custom to wear talit katan under the clothing, since we live among non-Jews, they failed to point out that this is not the real reason, but rather it's because of the Kabbalah. The Aruch HaShulchan said that some poskim rule that the proper way to wear the tzitzit is to wear the talit katan over one's garments, but he commented this is not the common custom. Furthermore, he cited the Kabbalist in the Oziel HaKadosh said that the talit are going to be worn underneath, page 98. Right? He says underneath one's clothing, he concluded over that he does not understand why anyone should be ashamed to display the mitzvah. Right? Tamidei Chachamim and everything that displeased with the practice of tucking in the talitot, the tzitziot, this complete seems to be strange. However, since he had just mentioned that according to the Oziel HaKadosh, it's supposed to be under. So therefore, I don't understand. So why are you ashamed then? At any rate, the response of Yaskil Avdi insisted that we follow the Rizal's instructions, and also the talit katan and also the tzitziot are going to be covered. What about the tucking the tzitzit inside one's clothing? So he says like this: the Levush wrote that since the purpose of the mitzvah tzitzit is to remember them, those who wear talit katan under the clothing must have at least the tzitziot at least exposed, so that way they could remember them. It's likewise the rule of Rav Zalman, right? The Shulchan Aruch Graz, right? The author of Shnei Luchot Abrit, the Shlach Kadosh, confessed that he wore a talit under his clothing to avoid the scorn of others, but he always kept the front too, so he exposed, so you could always see them. He recommended this practice. The Ma'amar Mordechai commented that he researched all the poskim, but he failed to find anyone that recommended this compromise of wearing talit katan under the clothing. The tzitziot should be outside. The common custom testifies is to wear talit katan and the tzitziot underneath, following the teaching of Oziel HaKadosh and Magen Avraham. It is clear from this that the tzitziot are likewise hidden underneath the clothing. According to all this, it's difficult to understand the teachings of Shar Kavanot that it is necessary to look at one's tzitziot at all times. Right? How does that work? And this is likewise the teaching of Rabbi Avraham ben Ezra. So he says, all this, however, cannot override the established custom of Sephardic Rabbanim, Poskim, Kabbalists, to wear it underneath the entire time. Right? And this is a conclusion of Rav Ovadia Hodaya also. He says, we have no complaint against the custom of the Ashkenazic Jews who wear the talit katan over their garments. They legitimately follow the rulings of the Shulchan Aruch, even when it counters against the Kabbalists. Look in the response to Admi Beru, right? And that he complained bitterly against the Sephardic Jews based on the Mishnah Berurah. He failed to ever take into account that all the poskim in the Kabbalists listed here. All of the above is taken from the response of Yechavedat, right? In an unpublished responsum, the Rishon LeZion said the Petil Techelet, testified the many great Sephardic Rabbanim, including Rav Shaul Dweck, hid their tzitziot in the response of Shem again, Rabbi Shalom Esas, that this was the correct custom. That was the correct custom of the rabbis in Tunisia and in Morocco. In fact, the Or LeZion said the Shiva Rav Izrat, declaring that any Sephardic Jew who places the tzitziot outside is guilty of disgracing all the Torah scholars of the previous generations. The responsa, right, of Vayasho Vayom, right, he says, expressed a reservation about one aspect of this halakha. In previous generations, the standard undergarment was a long tunic that covered the body from shoulders down to the ankles. The Torah scholars wore a talit katan over this tunic and then put on the robe, which covered the tunic and the talit katan completely. The robe was fastened around their waist with a belt. In this manner, they were able to uncover the tzitziot with ease. We have no proof, therefore, that they always kept their tzitziot hidden underneath their robes. In fact, he argued it's disrespectful to the mitzvah to tuck the tzitzit inside one's pants. He claimed that all the Torah mentors wore the tzitziot outside of their clothing, Therefore, he concluded it's proper to us to hang the tzitziot over one's clothing, emulating the Ashkenazi Jews. This is Vayashu Vayom. Several Achronim, in particular, refuted this argument. They complained that the author of the Yashvarim purposely refrained from identifying the Sephardic Torah mentors who wore the tzitziot over their clothing, because the truth is that there are none. They claim that this description of manners of dress in older generations is incorrect. That the rabbis wore the talit katan underneath the tunic and never displayed the tzitzit tassels. That Batil Techelet has approbations from all the Sephardic Torah giants in the previous generations, and they all agreed that Sephardic Jews, based on the Arizal, always used to hide them. We may therefore follow the custom of the rabbis of Purat Yosef, where this was of Zeratia, and wore modern style suits, and still they had the talit katan underneath, and also the tzitziot inside their pants. What about Lithuanian Jews? So he says over here, the Tzitz Eliezer wrote to Rav Yamin Zilver, stating that he knew thousands of Lithuanian Yeshiva students that they all wore tzitziot underneath their clothing. The great Rosh Yeshiva who taught them never complained about this practice. He testified. So the Tzitz Eliezer was saying, look at all the Rosh Yeshivot. Nobody had it out. The Kuntras at Tzitzit by Rav Shalom Leibovitz states, my father told me that he heard from his mentor, Rav Yisrael Zev Gutzman, that most people misinterpret the Mishnah Berurah. All Lithuanian Jews, including the Mishnah Berurah, had the custom of hiding the tzitziot underneath their clothing. Rav Gutzman saw the author, the known as the Chavetz Chaim, a number of times since he served as a judge in the Bedin, Rav Chaim Ozer Grudzinski. Furthermore, my grandfather, for whom I was named, was a leading disciple of his uncle, Rav Baruch Ber Leibovitz, the author of Birkat Shmuel. He spent all the time together with his uncle, as Rav Reuven Gruzovsky testified. My grandfather never allowed a tzitzit to show out of his clothing, since he had never seen any of his great mentors display the tzitzit. Furthermore, Yaakov Edelstein told me that in the European yeshivot, no one displayed the tzitzit over the pants. I also had Rav Rifal Shmulevitz, right, and Rav Aaron Chadash about their father's customs, and they both replied that their fathers always tucked the tzitzit inside their pants, even when they emigrated to Eretz Yisrael. Rav Michal Shrukin spent many years together with the generations of Rav Moshe Feinstein, and he also wore his tzitzit inside of his pants. My father also testified that Moshe had it inside of his clothing. It used to be that all the Jews, both Ashkenaz and Sephardic, wore their tzitzit completely underneath their clothing. In fact, we have clear testimony that even the Chavetz Chaim wore tzitzit in that manner. He did not behave differently from anyone else. His erudite grandson of Hillel Sachs likewise wore tzitzit underneath his clothing. He did not simply because they feared the taunts of the non-Jews. It's obvious since all the Torah scholars continue to practice even after emigrating to Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, you see that everybody had that custom. Inside, everybody, even the Ashkenazim. I guess it just came out afterwards, I guess, because of Mishnah Berurah, and then it went on fire, and then everything was inside. The merit of looking at the tzitziot. He said the Pesach Shuvot states that although the established custom of Sephardic Jews to wear talit under the clothing, it is highly meritorious to expose its seat every now and then in private and look at them. He started not saying that we should always look at the tzitziot every minute. Because it says, this is very good for one's souls, right? He said in another source, the Kavah Yashar, that he says, I have a tradition from devout people whom they had nothing else to do, would handle the tzitzit and look at them, explaining that by looking at them, it helps to raise the Shekhinah from its exile. Despite this, there is no reports of Torah scholars and leaders in general who observe this practice. They spend every spare moment learning Torah and review. And they looked at the tzitziot just when putting on Kriyat Shema in the morning, right? And that's it.